Square Enix, just like many others, is abandoning exclusivity. And this means only one thing. Soon, Steam will be inevitable. They will dominate over the world, just like prophecy has told. I personally already bow my head to Gaben with pride.
Square Enix, they're in the headlines again. It does seem they're rather struggling. And if there's a trend in 2024, I think it's the largest publishers in our industry finally just reaching a tipping point where their failures are finally catching up with them, and they've kind of got to admit reality. So today is Square Enix. What's happened, right, is their leadership have basically looked at what they think is an aimless release schedule, massive Final Fantasy games with insane expectations, and an MMO division that has been left basically carrying the weight of the whole damn company, even in years with no expansions, because, yeah, if there's not, like...
True. This is actually very true, I think.
Major Creative Business Unit 3, Creative Studio 3, which is what they're now called, if they're not winning, if they're not doing great stuff, then actually the whole company kind of is in a bit of a pickle. It's real interesting. So, at a corporate level, they say they've had enough of this, and they have a new plan, one that they hope will finally meet their famously absurd expectations. And I say famously absurd because Square Enix were always the people who are like, oh, we're very disappointed in this Tomb Raider game. It only sold 6 million copies or 5 million copies or whatever. It's very typical from them. When you look at how they release some of their games, it's like, lads, what the hell are you thinking? Like, that's just not going to work. This is going to be interesting. Fortunately, though, we...
typical AAA BS, isn't it, boys? Oh, we're releasing a game. It's bad. It has worse everything than the previous ones. And we plump it full of microtransactions and reasons for people to not buy it. Oh, it didn't sell good. How could this happen? How can this be? Oh, no. Yeah. A very common story, sadly, isn't it?
We don't have to huff ourselves on absurd expectations because of the support of viewers like you over at Bellular.games. Over there, number one, it's the best place to support what we do. It was in the black hole called the Epic Games Store. It's going to be coming to Steam after 3 years, and a bit of change, of exclusivity. And based on producer...
The Epic Games Store have pretty much also given up. Like, let's be real. They emailed Steam saying bad things, and Steam emailed them back saying, you mad. Which is, by the way, completely normal. Well, it's not exactly super normal, but you need to understand, these things are real and they happen. People have this strange idea that, in big companies, no one sends out emails where someone tells them to go eat bricks or something like that. No, they do it pretty often. Usually it's in person, but on writing an email, you mad, bro? LMAO? Nah, can happen pretty easily, especially with Steam.
Statements at the time. The implication here is the only reason we've got Kingdom Hearts at all in PC is because Epic basically paid for the exclusivity and encouraged the port, as well as assisting them on the technical side. But obviously, for audiences, well, Kingdom Hearts just got thrown into a black hole that they never look at. Right? The destruction of information, maybe.
True.
And I think this is the kind of thing that just represents Square Enix's problem with selling games, where they just do stuff, they throw it at the wall, and they've got no plan. Because, yeah, Kingdom Hearts and PC should be a no-brainer, should be the sort of thing that could win. We're seeing big RPGs do well in PC all the time, but if you just yeet it into the Epic Games Store, nobody's really going to know. I just wonder how many people had no idea that this game could be played on PC because of Epic, right? And I think this...
How many people do even play Kingdom Hearts at this point? It's someone that most people know, but I personally have never played Kingdom Hearts. I don't also care about it at all.
Is notable because this is one of the companies with the greatest back catalogs in all of gaming history, and those are games that have got very patchy availability on every platform. And when they do turn up, like with some of the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters or Chrono Trigger, well, you can have ports that are not handled fantastically. Meanwhile, in 2023, Square Enix have released 12 titles, and I'd say they've effectively marketed about 5 of them to audiences. We'll break that down, but it is kind of crazy, and Kingdom Hearts is just a perfect example of this lack of a clear plan. If Epic had not have offered exclusivity as a sort of motivational factor in the short term, would these games, would that have happened in PC whatsoever? Considering the rest of their library, it's absolutely not a given. And the fact that they were willing to take a short-term payday 3 years ago, that just says everything about Square Enix at the time. Not long-term strategy, just short-term paydays. And if you look through their history, the mangled development of so many games, be it Final Fantasy XIV originally, be it Final...
Now, this is something that you need to understand. People don't take short-term paydays unless they think that short-term payday in this situation is actually going to be better than the long-term payoff. That's the reality of it, okay? And at that time, 3 years ago, Epic Games Store was trying really, really, really hard to kick it to Steam. And then Steam did nothing, and Epic Games Store found a noose and a branch, and, then the gravity did its thing. That's effectively what has happened throughout history with people who try to oppose Steam.
Final Fantasy XIII and the whole weird mishandling of that series. It's all been crazy, but it seems they're trying to tell their investors that they actually understand the problem. So let's get into that and their financial failures. Square Enix did not meet their goals for the last financial year. They were targeting sales of about 400 to 500 billion yen, which is about 2.6 to 3.2 billion US dollars, and they wanted an operating income of 60 to 75 billion yen, which is 384 to 480 million dollars. Right, so the key fact there is they wanted between 380 and 480 million USD. What they got was 208 million USD, which is based...
Sucks. This is actually, this is actually pretty large, okay? Because keep in mind, no one expected the 400 billion yen to be the actual number. The lowest number that you expect should always be in projections the actual lowest number you can get. So the fact that they were roughly almost 50 billion yen under their lowest estimate, that's kind of bad.
Basically, like, less than half of their top-end prediction, which is pretty rough. And that shows a plan not working, and that is why the new CEO, Takashi Kiryu...
Wait, what is this? Previous midterm target, okay. And actual, okay. Yeah, this is also not great. But this... this is the thing with game companies. Midterm target, it's like, how do you reach it unless you have a 1-for-1 ratio of things you put in there? It's kind of hard and kind of dumb to do things like this.
Has spent the last year apparently preparing to change things. So we're going to talk about that.
And by the way, this being almost 2 times lower than this being, only 50 billion yen lower. This is nothing. As strange as that probably is for a lot of people to actually understand. In business, this graph is like, okay, we can salvage it. We can do things. It's just the start and blah, blah, blah. It's still bad, but you can kind of salvage this because you at least know which way the wind is blowing. But this is a bigger issue. This is really bad, okay? This graph is significantly less worse, even though statistically it is much worse than this. Which is a strange thing, but that's how business works.
At least what they're saying. And the new plan is, get ready for it, that they're going to deliver unforgettable experiences. Brave,
nice,
bold, stunning, never heard of before. Bit weird. When I saw that, my initial thought was, well, what the bloody hell does that mean? So let's talk about...
Hell yeah, I want to see Princess Peach get saved by Mickey Mouse, yeah. And then they bang.
What that apparently means to them. In their premium games department, so not the mobile stuff, this means a shift from quantity to quality and delivering ensured fun. Basically, big games with long engagement tails and a focus on reflecting the desires of their creatives, but also, yes, making games that actually will make a profit. I think a funny example of that is a game like Harvestella, which is profoundly just a turbo 7 out of 10 game. Now, it just so happens that Matt on our team, he absolutely adored the game because through its jank, it was actually trying to do stuff. But Harvestella was a great example of a game that Square Enix made for some reason.
No idea what this is.
Basically didn't market and was never in any universe going to be a big financial success. One of those things where you just think, what? You're Square Enix. Why are you being silly? Surely you could have handled this better. The first thing that this means is they're retiring the creative business unit model of development, instead placing more of a focus on in-house development by teams under a more traditional project model led by key creatives. And of course, as outsiders, we'd always see Creative Business Unit 3 and think, man, that is a horrible name for a team of creative people making amazing experiences like Final Fantasy XIV, right? So that's been weird. They're changing it, but they haven't been creative in the change because now Creative Business Unit 3 has been renamed to
Wow.
Creative Studio 3. Not very creative, but anyway. Part of this will see these studios being led by distinct creatives, and they will be given more authority. And that is why the leads for each studios are actually now being appointed as company.
Ooh, this is actually kind of big. Because when you have the distinction of they are given more power and whatnot, that's actually different from saying, oh, we're going to get all the good people in and to work on this project. And then when the good people want to do things, people are still, someone else says, no, not microtransaction friendly.
Directors. So, who are these people? Well, you've got Yoshinori Kitase, or Kitase, maybe. Sorry, I'm not amazing with names. So, he is Creative Studio 1 and 2, and he's been the director / supervisor or producer on every Final Fantasy, and also Chocobo GP. Chocobo GP, a very hilarious story from about 2 years ago. Of course, next we have got Naokai Ishida, of course, Yoshi P of Creative Business Unit 3. He is the only leader with no dual role, presumably because like FF14 is so important, like financially. So he's doing just Creative Studio 3. You then have Yosuke Saito, who is running Creative Studio 4 and 5. He's also got quite the history. I mean, executive producer on Nier, also Dragon Quest, the voice of the card series, and Star Ocean. Broadly then, safe hands that have actually delivered things in the past, and apparently this is a showing that Square Enix are now going to be relying on their creative leadership to some extent. Maybe realizing, and I know this is a shocking thing, but games are a sort of creative medium, and yes, the business stuff is important, but the business stuff happens because the creative bit, the games, are good. I think it's that traditional thing about what do? Do you try to follow the numbers, and I think that leads to very boring games, or do you try to make a game so good it creates new numbers, creates a new trend? Like as consumers, customers maybe, that's what we want. Now another part of this is really
That's not what we want, actually. How often... This is the customer paradox, right? Oh, we want new and creative stuff. New and creative stuff comes out and it's not perfect. Oh, who even told you that we want this? No one asked for this. Oh, the next Call of Duty game. Oh my god, it's a reskin of the last 15 ones. Pog fucking face. How often does that happen? Yeah, none of this ever makes sense. The stupidest reality of life is make good game, people will play it. But when you're a big company, loss mitigation becomes your number one thing that you actually want to do because you already have money. Now your biggest objective in life is not to lose money. So you kind of do the safer things most commonly. But doing the safer things doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't. It just doesn't. Doing new things can work out, but, you know, that doesn't mean that you make something new, it's going to be good. If that was the case, then, you know, indie games would have already skyrocketed in front of everything in the world because most of them try to be unique. But as we all know, being unique and blah, blah, blah doesn't actually mean you're going to be successful anyway.
Interesting. It is a multi-platform strategy including Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, and PC for major franchises and AAA titles including back catalog, but also Square Enix mobile titles coming to PC as well. And again, this just immediately lines up with the latest figures for 3 big titles. It's really interesting. And here's some real interesting analysis on that from Takashi Mochizuki of Bloomberg, right? Square Enix said FF16 sales fell short of expectations. So look at that, FF16. I mean, I know that there was a little bit of contention over, you know, maybe linearity and aspects of the game's design, but for the people who loved it, they really did love it. Interesting that its sales fell short of expectations. Now, their actual momentum initially in that game...
Well, to be honest, the phrase for the people who loved it, they really loved it, doesn't mean a lot, because you can also be a PDF file and really love it, and you do really love it, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing, you know? Kind of a no-brainer sentence there, honestly, right? Doesn't actually mean anything.
Was in line with expectations, but they actually missed their fiscal year goals because the momentum of its sales just slowed down, and we've actually had no updates from the company since they last gave figures of 3 million sales. So certainly, that's going to be rough. Also, he points out that FF7 Rebirth fell short of expectations. That was honestly kind of shocking to me. Now, he did say, initial momentum did not reach an internal target and no sales numbers have been shared. I can at least say I've known about FF7 Rebirth. I haven't massively seen it everywhere, and at the very least, I haven't seen much buzz about it. So I mean, interesting. It kind of explains that. Then, of course, the biggest game of all time.
This is something that I don't think honestly works. Because when you think about Call of Duty, why can Call of Duty just pump out a new copy of itself every single year and be successful? Well, that's because one, it's the biggest genre of that game that there is. Well, is Fortnite actually the same genre? I don't know, but you get the point. You get the point. 1, 2 doesn't matter. It's way up there, right? Well, that's because the people who play Call of Duty don't give a shit. Okay, that's just the brutal reality. Most people who play Call of Duty only play Call of Duty, and the rest are pretty much 10-year-olds. And those are audiences that are gonna buy your game constantly because that's pretty much the only thing that they do. But when you're talking about games like Final Fantasy that have niche audiences, and also audiences that sometimes care about what they consume, buy, and all of those aspects, it's kind of hard to sell those audiences a new iteration of the same game, even if it actually iterates on something good. Because it's simply just too much. Because they have kind of burnout.
Foam Stars. Foam Stars apparently fell short of expectations. The initial momentum didn't reach internal targets, and again, they have not shared sales numbers. So overall, it is a sobering analysis. Now, to be clear, he's not saying that these games are all doomed, right? He does say he thinks that FF16 can actually achieve its initially set out goals.
I don't think we should talk about just FF16. I think we should talk about Final Fantasy as a whole thing. Doesn't matter if it's the Final Fantasy, I don't know, city builder, role play game, Monster Hunter type of thing, or Sims 4 Final Fantasy, it's still Final Fantasy.
Also thinks that the sales of Rebirth and Foam Stars aren't necessarily very bad. It's just obviously not amazing, and not to the degree where Square Enix are, touting their sales figures from the rooftops. To cover the rest of his analysis, then, he points out that they've reorged into 5 console teams, 1 smartphone game team, that they have relied too much on an individual's creativity, will promote, and this is his word specifically, will promote sharing game making how among teams, and will seek best balance of individual creativity and organizational discipline. And I think that is a really strong bit of analysis. The idea of what Square Enix are saying
sounds strange, but that's okay.
Is trusting key creatives and doing large projects that actually seem like they'll reasonably pull in a profit. What we've perhaps seen is, yes, they have leaned in creatives. As an example, Harvestella is a game that was never going to make a lot of money, and it was a janky game. It was a profound 7 out of 10. Even in Steam, which is where a 7 out of 10 can get a 95% score because it appeals to its niche specifically really well, Harvestella wasn't doing great. Yeah, Matt absolutely loves it. And the reason why he loves it is because he loves the creative vision of it. But I think you can see that's a game with maybe some strong creative vision, but overall, there was not the organizational discipline to maybe give Harvestella the resources it needed, or maybe the marketing that it needed. He also points out that Dragon Quest XII is under development, and that the investor reactions are to sell shares heavily, leading to the stocks falling to the day's trading limit, and that investors are basically worried that their dev pipeline is too empty, that they don't have big titles that can fix up their situation over the next couple of years. Kind of interesting stuff, right? And I think overall, we've always known that Square Enix have been egregiously forecasting sales for their games, to the point where it does seem like they're just giving themselves a poison chalice for later. Again, so many projects, even, say, the initial Tomb Raider game of those reboots, that game sold amazingly, millions and millions and millions of copies. Square Enix had absolutely ludicrous sales expectations. But even with that in mind, if we're in a situation where Final Fantasy Rebirth and 16 are failing...
Now, to be honest, if I hear something like that, by the way, and it's a constant repeat, okay, so investors are selling their sales, aka the sales, the stock price goes down because, people lose faith in this company, right? So, is Square Enix buying the stock while the dip's happening, or how is this working? Because, if they are, that's called fraud. So I wonder if that's happening, I kind of would love that someone actually looks into that, because that would be hilarious.
To hit their goals, that is actually going to be a worrying thing. Now, this doesn't mean they failed outright, but it does mean...
Because keep in mind, the stock price is made out of hopes and dreams and nothing really tangible, okay? Square Enix can actually do good, but as long as they don't hit their own projections, stock goes down. That's how life works. The stock price is made out of fucking fairy dust at this point.
That they're changing things up. Now, what do those three games share? The answer is PlayStation exclusivity, and that's what's interesting to me. Just like how I suppose Kingdom Hearts was buried by Epic Game Store exclusivity, just like how PlayStation exclusivity probably meant some like nice beans up front. Clearly, they know that long-term sales are the important thing. And I guess FF16 is probably the clearest example of that, where, you know, it performs at expectations initially, they're really happy about it, and then it just does not have the long tail. Now, that's a game where PC, we believed was always going to be happening, but again, it's been a long-ass time. Like, we still haven't actually got a concrete release date for the PC version of that game. Seems pretty clear what their plan is then, that they just want things more onto PC. Yes, I suppose also onto Xbox, but I mean, come on, we all know that Xbox is not massive in terms of its install base. And when you look at the strategy here, I really don't think they're looking at a Game Pass deal, because
by the way, people are probably not also looking to Xbox favorably because Xbox is just trying to push their, especially with now Call of Duty going to the Game Pass, they're just everyone who gives their game to Xbox, even though they most likely sign some kind of deal, hey, you cannot put this on Game Pass, Xbox will still try and find a scummy way to use your IP that Xbox does not own to most likely try and sell Game Pass in some capacity. So no one wants to even go to Xbox that much, honestly, unless it's a ludicrously high number that Xbox is willing to give you, which is kind of funny.
Game Pass deals have always been trading in your maximum potential for reliable money at the time of the deal being inked. Whereas here, I think what we're very clearly seeing is, yep, taking those very reliable, nice upfront deals ultimately is robbing them, you know, from their future. Now, even though the PlayStation angle is a big one with their biggest games, many have also pointed out that there are more Nintendo exclusives than PlayStation ones over the last 4 years. It's actually 9 against 6. But again, Harvestella and Paranormal Sight, those are not going to be as expensive as FF16, and they will not have as high sales expectations, which basically means they're less efficient games organizationally. They obviously did not have the overall organizational bandwidth to give those games the resources and the marketing that they deserved. So obviously that's going to mean less of those small games and more bigger games that will be sold in more places. I would absolutely expect day and date PS5 and Steam will be a goal for them. They know that the Epic Game Store thing didn't really pan out, and Epic, let's just say they've had to be more financially disciplined as of late, so I don't think they're going to be paying stupid amounts of money for PC exclusivity. And I think they're also likely realizing that, yeah, these exclusivity things are fine, but guess what you need? Lots of people interested in your brand, and those exclusivity deals, while they can be amazing for your finances in the short term, they kind of cap how many people culturally will be interested in your game. Like in so many cases, the franchises that you've got great affinity.
That only matters, though, if people are not already interested in you. If you are an already known mega entity, then that doesn't necessarily make less people interested in you. And your reach is still big enough that you don't care.
Those are based on the console you owned as a kid. I mean, hey, that's why Halo can still make me really sad. Now, you might be wondering, okay, this is all interesting, but those analysts and those shareholders may be right. Like, where are the big new games? Where is the funding to make all this happen? Well, let's talk about funding and how they found it. They found it in the form of restructuring their Western offices. This was first captured by Video Games Chronicle. The publishing IT and Square Enix collective groups will all see layoffs, with teams immediately seeing Slack access be limited following meetings where they were informed about things. And that is quite sad. I mean, Square Enix Collective has done some real good stuff.
Oh no, again, game developers fired. Oh no, the tragedy. Where's my tiny violin at this point?
Hey, Power Wash Sim, that was them. So a bit rough them seeing layoffs, but you can see that if you're Square Enix, being a humongous zombified megacorp, that can be bad for efficiency. And yes, you can have wins with Square Enix Collective, but I've got to imagine that they're thinking, right, it's not worth the headache of bothering with so much of this stuff when we should be making the big Square Enix games that we are known for and putting those on every market that we can. But it is rough with Power Wash Sim, especially because it has appeared as a success story in their earnings reports. But of course, what are they doing in those earnings reports? They are highlighting facts that are going to make them look good. Now, it also does follow a very interesting pattern that is because of Japanese labor laws. They actually prohibit unrationalized layoffs, right? The ability to lay off staff rests mainly in the American-led offices where people will presumably be let go immediately, and then the EU offices where people will
America
probably have a period of consultation and, better severance and that sort of thing. But basically what it is Square Enix cutting costs and consolidating. We already saw them actually divesting, of course, their big Western studios, right? Like, that was a pretty damn big move that they made. So overall, less output, more focus on directly managing the things that are coming out, still having a few eggs in their baskets, but it's a big basket with only a few eggs. And
yeah, we're gonna see how this goes. Anyway, now it's complete speculation. Yeah, well, that was Billiard. This was Quizzers, and thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.